So hi, I'm Ernie Hawkins and I'm talking about Reverend Gary Davis's guitar style. It's a difficult subject because his playing is so diverse, so many genres, ragtime and early jazz, and of course gospel and blues and standards and country tunes and many originals. And I'm here to teach Reverend Gary Davis's wonderful song, Candyman. It's a brilliant piece of guitar work, just about one of the most perfect and baffling songs that Reverend Davis plays. So there it is, played slow, Candyman. Now the interesting thing about this song are the last three notes, the four notes. You hear those three notes at the end of the song, you wonder why there are three notes there. It's because on this song and on a few other Gary Davis's songs, particularly one called You've Got the Pocketbook and I've Got the Key, Gary Davis very cleverly and meanly, beautifully reverses basses. On most songs, when you're finger picking goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and almost always the low bass is the 1. So the one bass is 1, high bass 2, low bass 3, high bass 4. Now on this song, you hear him go through the F part. It goes. There's your 1, 2, 3, 4. Those last three notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, puts the song on this low bass on the fourth beat, which means that the 1 is going to be on the high bass. Sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Completely backwards of any way you've ever heard anybody finger pick a guitar. This is what makes it, when you try to play along with Reverend Gary Davis, very difficult to play with unless you're kind of hip to how his basses work. I know that he fiendishly like to take simple things and make them beautiful and difficult. And this is one fiendish little example. So that if I were to count this, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 2, 3, 7, 2, 3, 4, 8, 2, 3, 4, 9, 2, 3, 4, 10, 2, 3, 11, 2, 3, 4, 12, 2, 3, 13, 2, 3, 4, 14, 2, 3, 4, 16, 2, 3, 4. And it works out. Of course, all of Gary Davis's songs will count out to 8 bars or 16 bars or 12 bars, or in the case of John D. Rockefeller, Brought the Panic On, 10 bars. He's always very cognizant and strict about keeping all those bars going. In the case of Candyman, I think one of the main reasons why he does this is because when you're singing it, it makes sense. So 2, 3, 4. starts singing on that high bass, which is the 1, 2, 3, 4. Singing happens on the 1, and the 1 always happens on the high bass because that's where the singing fits in perfectly. Now this song is beautifully structured. It's in some ways very, very simple. He just uses C bass and he alternates between the G bass and the 2nd fret the A bass goes. Uses the low G bass. And he just throws these little notes in. Then he uses the 1. So the trick of Candyman is it's very simple to play in many ways, because once you get the hang of how these basses move in a very standard F, C, G progression, once you get the hang of that, it's very simple. The only thing that you have to keep in mind is to be sure that you're aware of how these basses reverse if you want to play it the way Gary Davis plays it. Now, of course, you can count it any way you want, and Dave Van Ronk in the 60s learned this from Gary Davis, learned it the normal way, and sort of changed it, and many people learned it from Van Ronk and thought Candyman's just a regular song like every other song, very easy to play. In that way, it is very easy to play, but if you want to play it the way Gary Davis played it, pay close attention to the tablature, and have a lot of fun working it out. This song I'm going to show you is this wonderful, famous Gary Davis song called I Belong to the Band. And the interesting thing about this song, as far as Gary Davis's style is concerned, is he has this beautiful, strict melody. It's actually not so strict. He's always improvising on the melody. And it's amazing how fluid and brilliant his improvising is. And at the same time, he's got a counterpoint bass working against that melody. So that's a C sharp chord there. Sorry. So this is an example of Gary breaking all the rules in fingerpicking, in the sense that he's not playing a steady bass. He's playing a counterpoint bass that complements the melody, and it's unique in American folk and gospel and early jazz and blues fingerpicking guitar, how Gary Davis looks at these songs. And if you want to understand how his style works, this is a really good song to start out with. He starts out with he's playing the melody. I belong to the band. Hallelujah. So hallelujah, hallelujah. So that's the melody, and if you listen to Gary Davis play it, you'll get an idea of how it works. And if you put that together with the way he plays the bass, just listen to the bass itself, how it breaks up and complements and pushes the melody along. It's brilliant. So he just starts out playing the melody by itself, and then he has a little bass lick. It goes with a little syncopation in it. down to the A minor, brushes, and then this really cool sequence of notes. He's really using the bass to support the melody and not to just supply a steady boom ding thing back and forth, but a bass that supports the melody, and the bass breaks up, and it's very steady, and it's very, the cool thing about it is he can break out of it at any time and improvise on these high notes in C. Sometimes he'll do this. So, to get an idea of what Gary Davis's style is, always pay close attention, particularly on his gospel tunes, to how his basses work, because that's really going to define the whole structure of the song and allow him to improvise and throw licks around within that structure along with the singing. And it's unique. I'm going to teach or show you as best I can the major parts of Reverend Gary Davis's flagship chestnut, Samson and Delilah. It's not an easy song to play. He didn't mean it to be, and it just shows off all his amazing technical abilities and his musical stuff going on. It's in the key of G, in standard tuning. I'm tuned just to pitch here, standard tuning, and I'm just going to try to go through it a little bit in parts. If I get carried away and play a little bit through, hopefully that's going to be all right. He starts out with an introduction. Okay, that's supposed to be up to G. That note. Okay, and so this introduction starts off on this, what normally is called an E form G. Gary Davis plays it with his thumb. And he sort of hits it open, lifts up his first finger. A lot of this is brushing, like this. Then he goes to a G minor chord, D7 chord, and a C chord. So the G minor chord is like a D minor chord, moved up to the 6th and 8th frets. This D 7th chord looks like this. So here's your A form D, and here's your D7. This is a handy chord when you're moving down from G to D7 to G, or from G minor to D7 to a Gary Davis C chord. He plays this as an A form C chord. He plays this with his thumb on the G and the C, his two middle fingers covering the A chord. So G minor, 7, C. He hits that C note, slides it up to this Gary Davis G7. It's made from a C7 form. This is a C7 form G7. And if you want to, by C7 form I mean if you move a C chord up, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G. So here's a G chord, it's in a C7 form. And if you want to have the high 5 note, in this case a D, and the 7th, you can move these two fingers over this way and add the basses on the 10th fret. So you have this wonderful full Gary Davis C7 form chord. Merle Travis is the only other traditional player that I know of that plays this chord a lot. And in some ways there are a lot of similarities between Merle Travis and Gary Davis. So anyway, he slides up to this C7 form G7 chord, C chord here, this is an E form, C chord, G minor, G7, G. And then for his little flourish up the neck, which he does a lot in the key of G, he slides up to, that's an A form G, to a G form G octave, so it goes. So there's your intro. And after the intro, he starts singing If I Had My Way. If I had my way, if I had my way, if I had my way, I would tear this old building down. So it starts out with If I Had My Way, if I had my way. It's just brushing on a G chord, and then he does this wonderful little finger picking thing where he's doubling up a G note. So he's playing the 5th fret of the D string, which is a G note, and the open G string. It comes down to the 7th, 6th. Goes back to this G, C. Sort of repeats that run in a different way, slides up on the G. And if I had my way, he walks up to this G. This is a Gary Davis D form G chord. And it's just a D chord up on G. If you move a D chord up to the 7th fret, you get a G chord. And he walks up with his first finger on the bass, hits that D chord. If I had my way, C, I would back up to the C7 form G, tear this old building down. So that's what his guitar is singing. Tear this old building down. And then he has this beautiful sequence, mostly on the bass, where he's playing behind the sung verse. So he's basically playing an accompaniment to the singing that sings the song along. And he walks up from a G, he's got his thumb on the G, and comes down. Gary Davis plays with one finger. And he does that doubling. Walks up. sometimes he'll rag that up a little bit with triplets. Now Gary Davis exclusively uses a thumb and a finger. So when he's doing those triplets, he's doing thumb, thumb, finger, thumb, thumb, finger, finger, thumb. And it's a triplet. Back to the verse. So that's back to the chorus there. So that's the verse, and the verse, and the way he sings the verse and what plays the guitar, very deeply and beautifully integrated. She was a woman, fine and fair. She had good looks, cold black hair. Back and he does the chorus. Now, the cool parts of the song after that are when he's just playing the verse on the guitar without the singing, and so what he's doing is he's adding a high note, which is the melody. So it goes. So that's the melody. So you hear it. That as a guitar break for a while, and finally works himself into the chorus guitar break. So it goes. That's the guitar singing If I Had My Way. Walks up to this G, D form G. He always comes back down. And so there you have, hopefully, enough of the elements that you can get through this song the way Gary Davis plays it, and hopefully sing along with it, because that's what really anchors the song in the melody and the chorus, and in the verse and the chorus. And if you can go through these parts piece by piece, reading the tab, you'll be able to play this song someday. I promise. So this is a song called Devil's Dream. And it's a traditional song. Gary Davis's version, as far as I can tell, unique. And here is a little bit of it. And as a traditional song, for a lot of the song, it keeps the bass pretty much steady. But then in the second part of the song, he starts to mess with it a little bit, and it's a lot of fun. Key of F. that's Devil's Dream. He's playing it out of an F chord, which is an E form. And often when Gary Davis, almost all the time, when he's playing this E form, he plays it with his thumb, and he keeps his finger on the first 3 strings so he can hammer from the 1st fret to the 2nd fret. So that first finger is covering not just the top 2 strings, but the first 3 strings, enabling him to do that kind of hammering. So the song starts out with a little bit of a kind of a, he used to say the devil's walking along, he's dreaming and he's dreaming he's walking along. It's kind of a walking thing. It slides down into a C7, which is the 5 chord in F. And he plays this run, one of many. He does this by just sliding up to the F. And then when he gets to the second part, he goes to the D minor, then A7, sometimes instead of doing the slide, he does this triplet thing with his right hand. As I said before, Gary Davis always played with 1 finger and 1 thumb. He used a thumb pick and a finger pick. And he loved to do this thumb roll, where he hit a bass, then a treble with his finger, bass, thumb, finger, 2 fingers. Excuse me, thumb, finger, 2 thumbs. Thumb, finger, thumb, thumb, then finger, thumb. So it's it's kind of a novelty tune, a lot of fun to play. 99.99% of all the many hundreds of Gary Davis songs, everything was in standard tuning. D songs, everything. And Gary Davis used to sort of disparage playing in open tunings with a slide. He considered it cheating, I guess because it was kind of easy and everybody could do it. But at the same time, Gary Davis had his own amazing little take on slide guitar. And in a wonderful sort of a talking blues, Gary Davis gives us a slide song in a very unusual tuning. It's a G6 tuning, and the tuning is D, A, D, F sharp, A. Now if this were regular G tuning, the high string would be D, but Gary Davis tunes that high string down all the way to B. Plays this lovely open tune, open chord, as he talks, and he tells a long story about him traveling on the road, meeting a woman who was a piano player, and he's sitting next to this woman, they're having a little drink, and it's a long story, a beautiful little story that he tells while he's playing, he's talking. This song, these chords, this chord, open chord, these strings, very nice, very sweet, And then finally he gets to her piano playing, and she starts playing a boogie woogie. And the way Gary Davis portrays that is this way. Thing about this is because he's playing triplets and he has this B note in there. He's sort of has all the ingredients for a kind of a swinging kind of tune, and so he plays through that and kind of gets himself boogieing a little bit, and then he starts doing what all slide players do. He starts singing. Sorry, here it is. And he's singing along with the slide, and then he launches into a kind of a bass piano boogie woogie type descending thing where he's doing this. It's not so easy to play. It's like this. So it's Gary Davis giving us his own special take on slide guitar, imitating boogie woogie piano, playing triplets over six chords, and showing us a unique take on blues slide guitar. And this song, Fast Foxtrot, baffled me when I was a teenager trying to learn it off the record. I could hear the melody, which was a regular sort of normal kind of swing melody. Oops. Melody went along like that. It had a little low bass that would fit itself in when needed. And then it had this beautiful counterpoint, mid-range counterpoint that went opposite in a way the melody, and the counterpoint went low bass, low bass. And I could play all those parts. I could figure them out easily enough, but I had no clue how he would ever put them together. And so the first time I met him, when I was 1965, I asked him to play it, and he chuckled, and he played it, and he didn't hardly move his fingers, but he could play all of those lines perfectly straight out, and you can hear them really well, and it was a revelation to me. It's a song called Fast Foxtrot. It goes like this. Play it slowly. Listen to the middle voice. So there it is, Fast Foxtrot, and I hope that you could hear the different voices. And one thing about Gary Davis's style, it was always supremely economical. He never had hand movements out of place. His way of making chords would take him all over the neck, but never had an awkward movement of his hand. He had the whole thing worked out perfectly. And this is a great example where he's playing all these voices and he's hardly really doing any work down here with his left hand. And how he does it. So, an example of how beautifully, economically Gary Davis can entwine voices in a way that just bespeaks the history of jazz, if you ask me. It's hard to really get down to essences of what his style is without just going through examples in different keys. One of his great and famous songs was his version of Scott Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag. And throughout this version of the song, Gary Davis, who always plays with one finger and one thumb, is using his patented sort of thumb-finger rule. Thumb, finger, thumb, thumb, finger, finger, thumb. So it goes... So what Gary Davis did was sort of boiled down Scott Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag into sort of thematic essences that he could adapt to his style of guitar playing, and so there are different parts to the song, and I want to just play a little bit of it, each of these parts slowly, show you how it works, and come back and talk about it a little bit to illuminate something of his style. So this is Maple Leaf Rag. Down to the ending. Sort of the ending. Close enough, I hope. So there are about 5 or 6 great parts to this song, And the beginning is easily recognized, and Gary Davis plays it in a couple of different ways. He either plays it on the 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, or he plays it on the 4, so he goes 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So, depending on how he's feeling, he likes to jump on that beat a little bit. He never really loses track of the beat. It's amazing. Second part, he's just sliding up on the E string. A, F, A. Back to the first part, 1. This part with an E in it. I'm not sure what the second chord is. I'll show you how to play it, but he keeps the whole thing with his roll going. So from this E7 chord to this chord where he's playing open E, a C sharp on the A, an A note, and a E flat on the second string. Back to F. Goes back up to the first part. Then there's the sort of upper guitar break where he goes up to the A and down to D. Now actually Gary Davis plays it this way. I found it really hard, so I just got regular A. It's an E7 chord. This is a C7 form of an E chord. So if this was your C7, moved up C, D, E, and you want the 5th on the high string and the 7th, he adds his bass with his thumb over the last 2 strings. And he plays his patented C7 Gary Davis chord, E7, so it goes A, D, A, E, A, So basically what Gary Davis is doing is moving all these parts around, improvising and changing them a little bit to make things interesting, and just giving you a beautifully conceived, full-fledged guitar rag, conceived out of the classic rag tradition. And of course everybody in the teens and the 20s knew and loved Scott Joplin, and Maple Leaf Rag was a huge hit. And so many guitar players loved trying their hand at it. Gary Davis loved trying his hand at any kind of music, and he would often walk by furniture stores that were selling record players and records, and they would have speakers out on the street, and he would stop with his guitar, listen to the latest song coming through the speakers, work it out, and move on. That's what he told me. So he had this huge repertoire of teens and 20s tunes that came out of the tradition or that came from records, and he had what I would call a phonographic memory, and when prodded he would remember amazing things. I would consider this, if it was he was playing it in the 20s jazz, really, so it's hard to say what it is, but it's a song called Slow Drag, sometimes known as Cincinnati Flow Rag. And it's a terrific song to play a few parts of it for you. I can really talk about this song for hours, but I'm going to just stay with the bare bones of it and give you an idea of how beautiful his style works internally with itself. So this is a little bit of Gary Davis's Slow Drag. So, some moves on Gary Davis' Slow Drag. He liked to take that song all over the place, up and down the neck, everywhere. And you should listen to it and maybe go to some of the teaching materials that people have out there and learn. And so, a really interesting, clearly seen or heard part of the song, the beginning. He's got a bass going up that he often syncopates, and he has a melody going down. It's the New Orleans beat. It's bum 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 bum. So Gary Davis loved to have voices moving. Inside voices, outside voices moving against each other. Treble going down while bass is going up, and vice versa. He loved doing it. He had a whole stable of all kinds of licks and doing it. And when he was playing C blues, he could improvise it amazingly. So one of the ways you can hear this done is in Slow Drag. So you can get an idea of how that works, and believe me, it's a lot of fun to work out and to play and to listen to Gary Davis doing it. It's just amazing, and he's unique in the history of American guitar and all American guitar players, and being able to improvise and improvise counterpoint and move counterpoint throughout all kinds of things. He loved doing it. It was kind of, in a sense, as far as guitar playing was concerned, a big part of his trademark. So there it is, Slow Drag. Hope you have an idea of how his style works with a song like that.